Patti Davis, the 39-year-old daughter of former President and Mrs. Reagan, has long been estranged from her parents. The fact that she had an unhappy childhood and blames her parents for much of the problem is not news. But now in a new book, an autobiography, Patti Davis has come forward with details that may shock people. Details about the way she was treated by her mother and her father, and details about herself. We talked to her about it all, and here is her story.
The truth is the truth. What happened, happened. Yes, there was abuse in this family. There was physical abuse, there was emotional abuse, there was substance abuse. That's what went down.
Patti Davis, the Reagan family rebel, says it's time to tell the truth. In revealing things of a private and embarrassing nature about her parents and herself, she argues that notwithstanding who she is and who they are, she's doing nothing more than anyone else who tries to come to terms with a painful past.
I've gotten letters from people where they tell me their family situations.
But their family situations are not the situation of a president of the United States.
But you know something? We have to get off that in this country and in this culture. We have to get off that because there's a first family or because there's a royal family that they're any different than any other family.
But of course the Reagans are different. He was president, she the first lady. And though they've left the White House, what their daughter Patti says now about the way they treated her as a child will still shock a lot of people.
There was hitting. There was emotional tyranny in a way. I think the most prominent memory I have of my childhood is that I didn't measure up. I could never get it right.
Patti says her mother, Nancy Reagan, hit her regularly.
Every day for a while. As I got older, every day.
What would provoke her to strike you?
Oh, anything. Just me, anything.
I mean, what did she hit you with her hand?
Her hand on my face.
She'd slap you?
Mm-hmm.
Patti, I've got to tell you, I mean, I think most of us at one time or another felt our parents sting in some sense. A hand, a belt, a paddle.
I think most of us did. And I think most of us have a problem about that.
Patti claims her mother hit her from the time she was in grade school until she was in college because Nancy Reagan herself had had such an unhappy childhood, begging for the approval of her stepfather, brain surgeon Loyal Davis.
He held out to her this possibility of legally adopting her and giving her his last name for 10 years. This little girl stood in the operating room while my grandfather was operating on people's brains. And she fought back the nausea and she fought back the dizziness, all those things that happen when you're exposed to that kind of sight, because she wanted him to love her.
And it took 10 years before he agreed to let her be Nancy Davis.
Yeah. Can you imagine the anger that builds up in somebody to have to earn love like that?
Patti says she eventually sought out her father when he was governor of California to tell him about her mother's brutal behavior toward her.
Well, he said I was lying, and he said I was crazy, and I think it was the first time I really realized I was never, ever going to know what it would feel like to have a father. Both of my parents have an investment in denial. Basically, they each have their vision of how they want things to be. My father's is everything's fine. There's nothing wrong here. Don't tell me anything's wrong, because he's the child of an alcoholic, and his world was too difficult when he was a child, so he learned to block that out. So that's the way he does it. My mother's is the opposite, but yet the same. Hers is everything's not fine. Nothing is fine, and I'm gonna build a wall around me. I'm gonna stay behind this wall. I'm gonna put gun turrets on it. Don't you dare come close, because I know if you come close, you're going to hurt me. And so I'm gonna aim at you before you aim at me.
Is that your mother? I mean, is she a control monster?
She is someone who has a tremendous fear that things will go out of control.
It was at this point that Patti Davis lost control herself in recalling her unhappy childhood. Did you Patti grew up in the Pacific Palisades section of Los Angeles. She says it was a sort of sealed-off kind of life, in which her parents mainly stayed home in the evenings watching television in their bathrobes. And in her mother's case, popping pills to keep going. Patti says her mother developed a drug addiction she believes persists to this day.
What kind of drugs did she take?
Tranquilizers.
She was hooked?
I would say so.
How many tranquilizers would she take?
Pretty consistently through the day, I would say.
Patti believes this addiction to tranquilizers was responsible for some of her mother's well-known falls, like this one when she fell down at the 1980 Republican Convention, or in the White House East Room when she and her chair fell off the riser. Patti says her mother's habit is what got her started on drugs as a teenager. She says on the night her father was elected president in 1980, she smoked marijuana and showed up at his victory celebration stoned.
Well, you live life in the very fast lane.
It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, absolutely. I knew it would horrify my parents. I was trying to horrify my parents.
Why? You wanted to hurt them.
Oh, I think so. Sure, there was a lot of anger there. Absolutely.
I wish you peace.
Part of Patti's rebellion involved living with guitarist Bernie Leadon of the popular rock group The Eagles. Her parents didn't approve. And it was during this period that Patti decided to take a step that she thought would permanently prevent her from ever having children of her own.
Now, the story that's out there is that you can't have children because you had a number of abortions.
I have never had an abortion. In fact, I've never been pregnant in my life. I got sterilized when I was 24. I had a tubal ligation. I was very afraid that if I became a mother, I would do to my child some of the things that my mother did to me.
10 years later, Patti had the operation reversed.
It's up to each of us to increase people's awareness of the...
Another way Patti struck back at her parents was to publicly oppose her father's policies. That attitude did not endear Patti to her mother and father. But the real break with the first family accelerated over one incident.
The book is called Home Front. And
Patti wrote a novel published in 1986 called Home Front, which took dead aim at her parents.
I thought it was interesting fiction.
A fictional format, maybe, but everybody recognized that the main characters, a right-wing California governor named Canfield, who became president, and his society-oriented wife, who was an awful mother, were meant to be the Reagans, who reacted at the time to Barbara Walters this way.
I didn't recognize anyone in that, and certainly the happenings never happened.
What kind of a mother do you think you were, Mrs. Reagan?
I tried to be a good mother. I don't think anybody's perfect. But then, you know, there's no perfect parent, there's no perfect child.
She was a good mother.
If the truth as Patti sees it is in her new book, she does, surprisingly perhaps, have some kind things to say about her parents. When Ronald Reagan was shot in 1981, Patti says she and her mother reached out to each other.
And I went into her room, and I didn't see the mother who had hit me. I didn't see the mother who I had been so frightened of for so long. I saw a woman who had almost lost her husband and who had not known whether or not he would live. And
she slept with his shirt.
She told me that she came back from the hospital that night and she took one of his shirts and she slept with it. And I remember that moment, sitting on the bed with her and hearing her tell me that. And it was the first time that I felt what forgiving her would feel like.
And Patti defends her mother against the story that her mother had had an affair with Frank Sinatra.
I don't believe that. You know, they are friends. They've been friends for many years, but I don't believe anything went on between them. My parents are so in love with each other. It is inconceivable to me that really that either one of them could be with anybody else.
How long have you lived here, Patti?
About 4 years.
Patti Davis lives alone these days in a modest house in Santa Monica, estranged from her family.
It's a big subject, you know. Dysfunctional families are a big subject, you know, and I'll bet that if you polled this audience, maybe 3 people would had nurturing, close, wonderful childhoods, and one of them is Phil.
Well,
you're lucky, but you're unique.
My parents, thank you, I thank you. But there's a billion kinds of dysfunction.
That's true.
And,
but you know what the one common factor is in all of them is secrecy. Whether it's alcoholism or molestation or
somebody
incest,
hiding something.
It's always secrecy, no matter what the dysfunction is. And I think that the more people who are willing to not keep secrets anymore and just tell the truth, that enables other people to not feel alone, to not feel like, I have to keep this secret, I can't talk about this, you know. You can talk about it. I mean, that's why John Bradshaw's latest book has been on the bestseller list for 40 weeks, because a lot of us are dealing with this stuff, you know.